He's wanted for crimes against humanity, but the son of Libya's former leader, Muammar Gaddafi, Saif al-Islam, has been released from prison. So what will this mean for Libya as it struggles with violence and competing governments? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Dareen Abu Ghayda. Saif al-Islam Gaddafi has been freed under a new amnesty law. His release was approved by one of Libya's administrations based in the eastern city of Tobruk. A court in Tripoli had sentenced him to death in 2015 for war crimes and suppression of demonstrations during the 2011 uprising. Well, the son of Libya's former leader, Muammar Gaddafi, Saif al-Islam, is also wanted by the International Criminal Court. Analysts say his release could further complicate the already fragile situation in the country. So Libya has been deeply divided since its longtime leader Muammar Gaddafi was deposed and killed 6 years ago. In July 2012, the country held its first free elections in more than 4 decades. The transitional government handed power to the General National Congress based in Tripoli. More elections followed, and the internationally recognized House of Representatives was formed in 2014, but the GNC refused to step aside. And later that year, the House of Representatives was forced to sit in the eastern city of Tobruk. The renegade general, Khalifa al-Haftar, took charge of a growing army which eventually allied itself with the Tobruk government. And there were peace talks in Geneva and Morocco, and in January 2015, the two factions agreed a deal, but it was never implemented. Then, late last year, the GNA, the Government of National Accord brokered by the UN, was set up. And in March of this year, General Haftar was named head of Libya's army, provided he recognized the GNA. Lots to discuss with our guests. Joining us here in Doha, we have Noha Abul Dahab. She's a visiting fellow at the Brookings Doha Center. In Tripoli, Fathi Fadli, who's a writer and professor at the University of Tripoli. Also in Doha, Ibrahim Freyhat, he's a conflict resolution professor at the Doha Institute for Graduate Studies and also the author of Unfinished Revolutions, Yemen, Libya and Tunisia After the Arab Spring. Welcome to you all. Noha, on the face of it, officially, we are hearing that Saif al-Islam Gaddafi was freed because of this amnesty law. But what could be happening behind the scenes? Could this brigade that freed him have gotten anything in return, and why would they free him now?
Well, you're absolutely right to point out that, his release, if he has indeed been released, what's telling is the brigade's statement, the Abu Bakr Siddiq brigade statement yesterday, referred to the release of political prisoners in the spirit of this amnesty law that was issued by the Tobruk government in 2015. And so it seems to me that there are indications that there is some sort of a political agreement between the Tobruk government and the Abu Bakr Siddiq brigade has been taking place.
Fathi, what are you hearing about Saif al-Islam's relief? And is it surprising that he's been freed, or the fact that he's been freed under this amnesty by the Tobruk House of Representatives?
First of all, thanks for having me. The amnesty law, which is released by Tobruk Parliament, is not should be a low one. We wanted Saif al-Islam or any accused personnel, Libyan personnel, to be released or not released based on a court decisions, not based on a political game or a political interest. And that's actually his release or not releasing based on a political game will increase and will add more problems to the country. He is an opponent. He still wanna be in a power. There are already enough conflict and confrontations in Libya in all the sides, economic, political, and military confrontations. And the releasing of Saif al-Islam will add more to this conflict.
We'll talk about the implications of his release in a moment, but since you're speaking to us from Tripoli, let me ask you for just a moment. At the time of his capture, there were scenes of jubilation, people very happy that he was captured. I doubt very much that you are seeing the same scenes right now in the country.
Yeah, since his arrest until today, There are many changes in the country, many changes. Actually, there are the confrontation, the revolution against February the 17th revolution, and all the problems the Libyan citizen went through since his arrest. It changed a lot of vision about the Libyan people. His release will make some people happy, but will make other people are very angry at the news of his release.
Okay, let's ask Ibrahim Freihat on the reaction. Specifically, Ibrahim, when you look at the issue of the UN-backed government, what do we expect the reaction there to be?
Well, I think this is going to be very surprising for them. And the main reason for this is that actually the release is coming as a result of some sort of a political agreement that seems to be forged between the House of Representatives in Tobruk and with the Zintan Brigade, or Abu Bakr Sadiq Brigade, that they were holding al-Gaddafi. Now, let's keep in mind that Zintan Brigade, who have been holding Saif al-Islam since 2011, they were in close alliance with Haftar and the House of Representatives in Tobruk. So this should be understood as a result of this kind of polarization within Libya. And that's why the UN-backed government in Tripoli is not expected or unlikely to take this very softly, because this is going to further complicate the already complicated political map in Libya, and is going to further polarize the political equation in Libya even more.
But when you talk about a political agreement, what exactly do you mean here? What are you referring to, and what kind of agreement could have been worked on?
Well, that's the issue that yet to be seen, actually. What is exactly led to this release, this unexpected release, actually, at this particular moment? Because first of all, let's keep in mind that holding him by certain brigades was not the right situation in the first place. You know, for someone on his level accused of war crimes should be held by the state, not by brigades. That's one. Two is that to be released without through the court, and especially that the ICC is demanding the extradition of Saif al-Islam. So there is some politics. Some politics have been involved from the beginning and now. So I think the best way to think about this is that as a result of the polarization between the East and the West, and now we have seen lately actually some escalation in the tension between the East and the West, between the House of Representatives and the West and the UN-backed government. So I think the best reading I can read of this is that that there is help needed, or appealing to the groups of former Gaddafi and president of Libya. So this release of Saif al-Islam, I think it's more of appealing to that group, or to the people that he represents,
right,
and could join the political conflict between the East and the West. Here's
the thing, Nuha, Ibrahim was mentioning the ICC just a moment ago. So this is really a direct challenge to the ICC and the UN, who are demanding Saif al-Islam's extradition on that he should stand trial on war crimes at the International Criminal Court, The Hague.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, his arrest warrant from the ICC has been lingering since 2011, and I'm sure we will be seeing some statements coming out of the ICC, perhaps the UN, condemning his release and requesting again his transfer to The Hague. However, I mean, the problem remains: how will he be arrested? How will he be transferred to The Hague? And so the ICC remains still in a very sort of tenuous position with regards to his release, if indeed he has been released. One thing I wanted to add following Ibrahim's intervention there is that despite the fact that this amnesty law has been invoked in the statements that we've seen thus far since over the last couple of days, the amnesty law, it's law number 5, I believe, of 2015, or law number 6. It states that individuals should be released, but there are certain conditions that prevent their release, such as if they were accused of crimes of rape, torture, corruption. What's interesting is that in the trial of Saif al-Islam Gaddafi that took place in 2014 and the 30+ other individuals from the former regime, corruption was one of the charges. And many of the crimes that were listed in the conditions of the amnesty law were also included in the charges. So it's interesting that they're invoking this law when it doesn't actually apply.
Right. Fathi, the lawyer, Saif al-Islam's lawyer, has been speaking to media, and what he said is that he expects Gaddafi to address the Libyan people and saying that he wanted to work on reconciliation and fighting terrorism in Libya. Do you see at all a role in Saif al-Islam Gaddafi going forward in the country?
Actually, if this has happened, it's just like a joke. It's a pathetic. Saif al-Islam, his father, and the regime of his father got a chance for 42 years. 42 years, a chance to govern a country, and end up as a failing state. And I really surprised if he still wants to come again and play any political role in the country after all this failure. A huge wealth, revenue, oil revenue, power, time, again, 42 years, and yet they come out with a failing state. And I think if he tried again, I didn't understand what new ideas, what new efforts he can bring to the country. Plus, his father's regime, which is Seif was part of it, is a terrorist state, actually. It's a brutal state. I mean, the revolution actually happens because of the brutality, because of the terrorism he acted, he practiced against the Libyan people. I'm really surprised, and if he can.
But here's the thing, Fathi, when you have a country like Libya that has suffered through the past 6 years, it has weakened institutions, it has 3 different governments who are vying for power. So this just makes it much easier for men like Saif al-Islam Gaddafi to just come in and fill the vacuum. You have a real power vacuum going on in the country.
I agree with you. We have huge problems, confrontations since 6 years ago. That's true. But to fix these problems does not bring the people who are causing it. I mean, Saif al-Islam is one of the reasons of what we are going through now, directly or indirectly. I mean, we are suffering the result, the fruit of the regime, of the previous regime. I mean, he is an element of adding, of causing the confrontation.
Ibrahim Frayhat.
Actually, he cannot. He should not. Actually, he should not. And
Ibrahim Frayhat, there are several local news reports, at least, coming out of Libya that say that Saif al-Islam might be heading to the city of Bayda, perhaps. These are not confirmed whatsoever. But Bayda is where the eastern government is based. We know that the eastern government is backed rather by General Khalifa al-Haftar, we were mentioning just a moment ago. Khalifa al-Haftar being a close ally of Egypt as well as the United Arab Emirates. So let's look at the big picture here for a second and look at the role that countries are playing in Libya. So when you take the UAE specifically, what is their policy in Libya?
Well, here's the thing. I think, I mean, we're seeing all types of principles have been violated in the name of fighting terrorism. And I think this is just one additional thing that we're seeing more under the name of fighting terrorism. We're seeing
when you talk about principles being violated, am I safe to assume that you are talking about the UN report that's been put out?
Well, it's about, yes, it's about the UN report. It's about, I mean, the war crimes in Syria and everywhere in the region.
And just for clarification, that UN report basically revealed that the UAE, this is according to the UN, the UAE had violated the UN arms embargo on Libya by providing air power for the forces of Khalifa al-Haftar in eastern Libya, just for clarification. But go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Saif al-Islam was held by Zintani Group. Zintani Group traditionally, I mean, since all this civil war started, have been close allies of Haftar. And Haftar is not a secret, has been strongly supported from day one by the United Arab Emirates and by Egypt. So we're seeing this, actually, the reports that he's going to the east towards Haftar. And it's obvious that this in all coordination with Haftar and his strong allies Zintan in the west. So that's one additional report that we're seeing from the UN about violation of UN Security Council resolution 1970 that enforces embargo on Libya in terms of arms supplies. Under this name of fighting terrorism, and we're seeing in the intervention, the Egyptian intervention in Libya lately also of bombing after the terrorist attack that happened in Egypt. A number of attacks by the Egyptian government. So under this name of fighting terrorism, actually we're seeing the rules are changing, everything is changing in the region, and this is one additional thing. And I think this is going just to add, to make the situation in Libya more disastrous in terms of adding new players of the former regime elements joining this. And talking about reconciliation, Gaddafi and Saif al-Islam actually failed to do reconciliation in 2007 and 2008 before the Arab Spring began. Right. So not sure what role for reconciliation that Saif al-Islam has, but I think it's going to be all under this slogan that we have in fighting terrorism, and where situations continue to be deteriorating.
No, I see you nodding along to what Brahim is saying. Do you think that the dynamics of the Libyan conflict are just going to continue to fluctuate depending on the regional and international players? And we spoke a little bit about the UAE. What about Egypt's role? Egypt's been vying for a role at that table.
Right. I mean, well, you can see the beginnings of this narrative that Ibrahim has referred to, the counterterrorism narrative, sort of coming into play in Libya right now. And what more opportunity time right now with the current Gulf diplomatic crisis as well. And so what was telling is one of the Libyan Arabic media reports, allegedly a Zintani militiaman had stated that the release of Saif al-Islam Gaddafi is important for the unification of Libya. So if indeed, this was said, then you can see if there is sort of this rapprochement between Haftar and the brigade, the Abu Bakr Siddiq brigade for the release of Saif al-Islam, it would be in the name of counterterrorism, in the name of unifying Libya, in the name of national security. And Haftar and company, bolstered by sort of their alliance with Egypt and the UAE, especially now with the diplomatic rift happening in the Gulf region, it makes sense in terms of timing.
What is Egypt's long-term policy, though, in Libya?
Well, I mean, their goals are, they're their counterterrorism goals, their alleged counterterrorism goals, their anti-Islamist sort of slant. Haftar fits that sort of profile, but it's not just that. It's also, since we're talking about bigger picture, it's this renewed authoritarianism. It's this bolstered authoritarianism post-Arab Spring that's happening. And so Haftar is sort of coming from that background in the sense that, sure, he was Gaddafi's strongman in the late 60s, throughout the 70s and the 80s. Sure, he was then exiled. However, he comes from that sort of ideology, this sort of, from an authoritarian sort of ideology. And so you can see this alliance using the narrative of counterterrorism and anti-Islamism, Egypt and Haftar sort of siding that way, and then bringing in Saif al-Islami would further empower that.
Fathi, Ibrahim just a moment ago, in fact, was talking about national reconciliation. Do you believe that national reconciliation is a viable option in the short-term future in Libya, and what would it take to get there?
Yeah, it is possible. National reconciliation is possible. Regarding that, no foreign countries involved, no foreign parties involved in this, because the major problems that we are going through is because of intervention of other countries and institutions and personnel and politicians. This is the main reason for the conflict. Like United Arab Emirates, Egypt is smuggling weapons to one of the parties, to Haftar, so the people killing each other and Libyan people killing each other, and the problem continue. How can, for example, United Arab Emirates and Egypt participate in reconciliation? How can Saif al-Islam and other people like him, or Haftar, who are the reason of the problems, can be a part of reconciliation? Yes, the national reconciliation is possible, but has to be done internally, has to be done by out of the people who are causing the problem and away from the people who are interfering in our country. It should be a national thing. It's a national reconciliation that taking out the people who are causing the problems.
Ibrahim Farayhat, the fact of the matter is that though Libya does suffer from a quote-unquote terrorist problem. ISIL is a real issue in the country, with even warnings from American officials, counterterrorism officials, calling Libya, in fact, a powder keg, saying that ISIL is regrouping and it's exploiting the chaos and political vacuum. So it's a very difficult situation for the country to be in.
That's correct, and we should actually ask ourselves who produced who. I mean, the chaos in Libya produced ISIS. It's not the other way around. I mean, the chaos in Libya started right after the collapse of from the revolution, and then followed by after the collapse of the Gaddafi regime, and that's when quiet for some time, and then we had the civil war started with the emergence of Haftar in the east, who wanted to, according to him, to eliminate all Islamists from Libya, which is a very unrealistic goal, because how you're going to do this? And the only outcome of the emergence of Haftar actually was to further polarization of the Libyans and the failure of any political settlements. And as a result, we started to see the emergence of ISIS there. So if we actually want to really address the issue of ISIS in Libya, we should be looking at the causes, the underlying causes that produced ISIS, which is the absence of a political settlement, the failure of a reconstruction, an effective reconstruction process, and actually practices such as this. A war crime, someone who's accused of war crimes in Libya is being released without going through the court, without being properly treated and dealt with on the ground that he's accused of war crimes, whether it's through the ICC or an effective judiciary within Libya. So to release him, a war criminal, to release him with no accountability, you're sending a message in Libya that no matter how many war crimes you commit in Libya, you will eventually be released with some sort of a political agreement or a political deal that's done between the parties, which is going to exacerbate the crisis and make Libya less safer and more chaotic, and also encourage others, with the absence of this principle of accountability, is to be engaged with these practices. And then we wonder why we have ISIS.
I suppose, Noha, you agree with what Brahim Fraihat has to say in terms of no accountability, but also give me your thoughts, final thoughts, in fact, on where you think national reconciliation stands and what are the scenarios going forward.
Well, I mean, as we said before, the ICC sort of avenue is unlikely to happen anytime soon, and I agree with Mr. Fathi that it needs to be a very sort of a national process, a national reconciliation, obviously, and so now that's much easier said than done, given the rival governments and so on. I think there needs to be the fallacy of the counterterrorism narrative for the sake of security and national unification needs to be exposed. It needs to be made clear that the priorities of the victims and of your average Libyan need to come first.
All right, we'll leave it there. We thank you very much. Thanks to all my guests, Noha Abul Dahab, Fathi Fadli, and Ibrahim Fraihat. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For myself and the whole team here in Doha, goodbye for now.